It was a cold winter morning in New York City when Michael Anderson, one of America's youngest billionaires, stood outside the delivery room, hands trembling. His wife, Laura, was giving birth to their first child, the moment he had been dreaming of for years. When the doctor finally came out, Michael's heart pounded with excitement. But the look on the doctor's face froze him. "Mr. Anderson," the doctor said softly, "your baby boy is alive, but there's something you should know. He was born with a severe spinal condition. He won't be able to walk." Michael's world shattered. He rushed inside to see Laura holding their tiny son, Ethan. The baby's eyes were closed, his body weak. Tears rolled down Laura's face as she whispered, "He's beautiful, no matter what." But Michael couldn't even speak. He just stared at his newborn, the heir to his billion-dollar empire, who would never walk, never run, never live the life he had imagined. As the years passed, Ethan grew up surrounded by wealth, but trapped in silence. Michael poured millions into doctors, surgeries, and specialists, but nothing worked. Meanwhile, across town, in a poor neighborhood of Brooklyn, a little girl named Sophie Miller lived with her widowed mother. Sophie was 10 years old, full of kindness and curiosity, always helping her mom clean houses to survive. She had no idea her path would soon cross with the richest family in New York, and that she would uncover a truth so shocking it would change all their lives forever. 10 years had passed since Ethan Anderson was born. Despite his condition, he had grown into a gentle and intelligent boy, confined to his wheelchair, but with a heart full of dreams. His mother, Laura, spent every day by his side, while his father, Michael, buried himself in work, unable to face his son's pain. At the T. Anderson mansion, the family was preparing for their annual charity event, a day when hundreds of guests, staff, and volunteers came to support the Anderson Foundation for Disabled Children. That's how Sophie Miller, now 16, ended up there. Her mother had been hired as a cleaner for the event, and Sophie came along to help. It was her first time stepping inside such a grand home. Marble floors, chandeliers, walls lined with art worth more than her entire neighborhood. While carrying boxes of decorations, Sophie accidentally took a wrong turn and found herself near the garden. That's when she heard a faint sound, soft piano notes coming from an open glass door. Curious, she peeked inside. There sat a boy her age, pale and fragile, his legs motionless but his hands dancing gracefully across the piano keys. The music was full of sadness and beauty, and Sophie couldn't look away. Suddenly, Ethan noticed a reflection in the glass. He stopped playing. "You're not supposed to be here," he said quietly, his voice calm but lonely. Sophie blushed, stepping back. "I'm sorry. I was just... the music. It was beautiful." For a moment, Ethan didn't reply. Then he smiled faintly. "No one ever says that. Most people just feel sorry for me." Sophie walked closer, her fear fading. "Well, I don't. I think you're amazing." That was the first time Ethan had heard words like that from anyone his age. From that day forward, something unexplainable began. A friendship between the billionaire's son who couldn't walk and the poor girl who had nothing. But neither of them knew that Sophie's arrival wasn't just coincidence. Something about her presence made Ethan's health begin to change, in ways no doctor could explain, and soon, Sophie would stumble upon something hidden in that mansion, something that would reveal the shocking truth behind Ethan's paralysis. Over the next few weeks, Sophie continued helping at the Anderson mansion. She cleaned rooms, arranged flowers, and sometimes brought lunch to Ethan's study. What began as small conversations slowly grew into real friendship. Ethan looked forward to her visits more than anything. She made him laugh, taught him card tricks, and told stories about her life in Brooklyn. How her mom worked 2 jobs, how they shared one room, but always kept it full of love. One afternoon, while helping Ethan organize some books near the library, Sophie noticed something unusual, a locked wooden door behind one of the tall curtains. She pointed at it. "What's in there?" Ethan looked confused. "I don't know. That door's always been locked. Dad says it's just storage." But Sophie saw the hesitation in his eyes. It didn't feel like just storage. Later that night, as she was helping her mother in the kitchen, Sophie overheard 2 staff members whispering. "It's been years since they've talked about that night," one maid said softly. "If people knew what really happened when the baby was born." Sophie froze. What really happened when the baby was born? She couldn't stop thinking about it. The next day, she noticed something else strange. Ethan had started feeling sensations in his legs. It was small, almost nothing but real. I felt something, he whispered, shocked. It's like a tiny spark. Doctors had told the family for years that his paralysis was permanent. But now, somehow, since Sophie had been around, his body was responding. Sophie didn't understand it either. She felt drawn to Ethan in a way she couldn't explain, as if some invisible thread connected them. That night, she walked past the mansion's hallway again, unable to resist. The locked door seemed to call to her. She placed her hand on the handle. Cold metal. Silent house. Then a faint sound, a mechanical click, as if something behind the door shifted on its own. Sophie stepped back, heart pounding. She didn't open it. Not yet. But deep down, she knew whatever was behind that door was the key to Ethan's paralysis and to the shocking truth about what really happened the day he was born. The next few days at the Anderson mansion were quiet. Too quiet. Michael Anderson had flown to Chicago for business, and the atmosphere felt lighter without his strict presence. Laura spent most of her time caring for Ethan, who was still amazed that he could feel slight tingles in his legs. Sophie couldn't shake off the mystery of that locked door. Every time she walked down the hallway, she felt its pull, like it was waiting for her. That Friday afternoon, a sudden thunderstorm hit the city. Power flickered, and the mansion's alarms went off for a few seconds before everything went dark. Laura rushed upstairs to check on Ethan, and the rest of the staff ran to reset the backup generator. Sophie found herself alone in the hallway. The locked door stood in front of her, half hidden by the moving shadows of lightning flashes through the window. She hesitated, then reached for the doorknob. To her surprise, it turned easily. The power outage must have released the electronic lock. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside. The room smelled of old disinfectant and metal. Machines lined the walls, covered with dusty sheets. On a small desk lay stacks of medical reports, photos, and a single baby bracelet with the name Ethan A. Sophie picked up one of the folders and gasped that it wasn't a medical record. It was a DNA test report dated the same week Ethan was born. Sample, Michael Anderson, father not a match. Sophie's hands trembled. Not a match, she whispered. That meant Michael wasn't Ethan's biological father. Suddenly, she heard footsteps, slow and heavy. Laura Anderson appeared in the doorway, her face pale as a ghost. Sophie, what are you doing here? Sophie turned, terrified. Mrs. Anderson, I didn't mean to. I just... Laura's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the papers in Sophie's hands. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She just sighed, a deep, broken sound. You shouldn't have found this, she said quietly. But maybe it's time someone knew. Laura closed the door behind her and walked towards Sophie, trembling. Ethan's paralysis, it wasn't an accident of nature. It was punishment. Someone wanted to make sure my son could never walk, because of who his real father is. Sophie stood frozen, her heart racing. Then, who is his real father? She asked. Laura's lips quivered. She opened her mouth to answer, but just then, they heard the mansion's front door slam. Michael Anderson was home. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the mansion like thunder. Laura froze, clutching the file Sophie had just read. He can't find out you're in here, she whispered, her voice shaking. Go now. But before Sophie could move, heavy footsteps approached. The door creaked open, and Michael Anderson stood there, his sharp blue eyes darting from Laura to Sophie to the open folder on the desk. What is this? He demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Laura tried to speak. Michael, please. But he grabbed the file from her hands and scanned the first page. His face went pale, then red. You kept this? He hissed. After all these years? Sophie stood silent, terrified. She didn't know what to do. Michael turned to her, eyes narrowing. He said coldly, you've been snooping where you don't belong. Sophie tried to explain. I didn't mean to. Ethan needs to know the truth. The truth. Michael's laugh was bitter. You think you understand the truth? He took a step forward, voice rising. When Laura got pregnant, she lied to me. She said Ethan was mine. But the real father, he was my business partner, my best friend, the man who betrayed me and then disappeared before Ethan was born. Laura burst into tears. Michael, stop. Please, she's just a child. But Michael wasn't listening. His anger had years of pain behind it. When Ethan was born paralyzed, I thought it was karma, a reminder of their betrayal. I spent millions trying to fix him, but deep down, I never believed he deserved to be healed. Sophie felt sick. He's your son, no matter what, she shouted at Michael's face twisted in rage. He's not my son. At that exact moment, a quiet voice came from behind him. Yes, I am. Ethan sat in his wheelchair in the doorway. His eyes were filled with tears, but also something else. Courage. He had heard everything. You think I don't know I'm different? Ethan said softly. I've heard you talking to doctors when you thought I was asleep. But you're wrong, Dad. You may not be my father by blood, but you're the only one I've ever had. Michael stared at him, speechless. The storm outside raged louder, lightning flashing across the room. And then something impossible happened. Ethan tried to move his leg, and this time it moved completely. Laura gasped, falling to her knees. Sophie covered her mouth. Ethan stood, slowly, shakily, but he stood. Mom, I can feel everything, he whispered. Michael stepped back, pale. For the first time in his life, he didn't know what to say. And in that silence, Sophie realized something powerful. Ethan's healing wasn't medical, it was emotional. The truth had set him free. But what they didn't know yet was that the story wasn't over. Because the man who was Ethan's biological father had just returned to New York. Rain poured over New York City that night as thunder rolled through the sky. Inside the Anderson mansion, time felt frozen. Ethan was standing on his own feet for the first time in his life. Laura was crying uncontrollably, and Michael stood speechless, torn between guilt, anger, and disbelief. Before anyone could say another word, the sound of tires screeching echoed from outside. Headlights flashed through the windows. Someone was coming up the driveway fast. Laura's face went pale. It can't be, she whispered. The front doors burst open, and a tall man stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat. His eyes locked on Ethan. Laura, he said softly, it's time you told him the truth. Michael's fists clenched. Get out, David. Sophie, standing beside Ethan, whispered, that's him, your real father? Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. David Reynolds, Michael's former business partner, looked older, worn down by years of guilt. I didn't know Laura, he said. You never told me Ethan survived. Michael's voice thundered. You left her when she needed you most. You think you could just walk in here and fix everything? David looked at Ethan. I didn't know she was pregnant. When the accident happened at the lab, they told me she'd lost everything. Her baby, her health. I left to protect her from the company's investigation. Sophie's eyes widened. Wait, what accident? Laura finally spoke, her voice trembling. Ethan's paralysis wasn't genetic. It was caused by an experimental serum the company was developing. They used it on me by mistake while I was pregnant. The chemicals damaged Ethan's nerves before he was even born. Ethan froze. So, I wasn't just sick. Laura shook her head. No, honey, you were hurt by something they tried to hide. Michael kept it secret all these years, to protect his company, not you. Michael's eyes filled with shame. I wanted to save my empire, he admitted. But in doing that, I destroyed my family. The room fell silent except for the rain. Ethan walked, slowly but confidently, toward Michael. You both made mistakes, he said softly. But if I can stand today, maybe it means we can all start again. Michael fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Ethan reached out and placed a trembling hand on his shoulder, then earn it. Laura stepped forward and hugged them both, her heart breaking and healing all at once. Sophie watched quietly, knowing she'd been brought into their lives for a reason, to uncover the truth and bring light to a family trapped in secrets. As the storm faded outside, the sun began to rise. For the first time in years, the Anderson mansion felt alive again. Ethan took his first steady steps toward the window and whispered, I was born broken, but love fixed what science couldn't. Sophie smiled through tears. No, she said softly. The truth did.